You have to ask President Obama, because he was the one that let Crimea get away. That was during his administration. And he was the one that let Russia go and spend a lot of money on Crimea. Obama can say all he wants, but he allowed Russia to take Crimea. I may have had a much different attitude.
That was President Trump blaming President Obama for allowing Russia to invade Ukraine and annex Crimea. One person he did not blame, Vladimir Putin. My panel's now here with me. Karine, I want to start with you because you worked for President Obama, and I'm wondering what you think about the comments from President Trump.
First of all, it's just not true. But it's a common thing with Donald Trump. When he says something that is completely indefensible or does something that's indefensible, he blames Obama, or he finds another foe and does that. It's Hillary Clinton at times. But it's as truthful as him saying that Obama wiretapped Trump Tower, Obama spied on his campaign. I mean, this is what he does, and it's really just laughable and sad and also dangerous. Remember, he talked about past presidents yesterday in a conference on foreign soil, which is unheard of. It's something that nobody ever does, and this is just another kind of abnormal things.
The issue, David, was about why should Russia be allowed back into the G7 or G8, considering that they invaded Crimea, and he immediately shifted to blaming Obama.
Let's take, not surprisingly, I don't agree with Karine. Let's take a look back at this, right? The Atlantic, not necessarily a right-wing publication, ran an article right in I think 2014 talking about this and saying, is Obama to blame? President Obama at the time, and I think this was his view, I'm pretty certain on this, that, you know, Ukraine was not a NATO member. Ukraine was always going to be more important to Russia than it is to the United States, and it wasn't worth going to war about. Listen, John McCain, who we've talked about here on this program many a time, and other Republicans wanted to send arms to Ukraine. They wanted to arm the Ukrainians so they could fight the resistance. Obama didn't do it, didn't want that to happen, didn't allow it to happen. And so I think the president does have a point that we could have done much, much more in Ukraine to help these people push back the Russians, and we didn't. We just let it go. Because of that point, because of Sevastopol, because of the Black Sea Fleet, it's super important to the Russians, and it's a question: is the U.S. prepared to go to war in Crimea?
So let's focus more on the Russia part of this, and not as much on the Obama part. With all that President Trump has said about Russia and letting them into the G7 or the G8, a sitting U.S. Senator, Democrat Jeff Merkley of Oregon, tweeted out, quote, "Which country is the American president working for?" What do you make of that?
Well, it's a good question. I've never understood Trump's strategy when it comes to his rhetorical deference to Putin. It should always be pointed out, in terms of policy, this administration has actually been very tough on Russia, and it doesn't get enough credit for that. But rhetorically, Trump is downright deferential. That is not projecting strength. That, I think Trump is at his weakest when he is running around the world groveling on behalf of Vladimir Putin. And it's no different here in Charleroi, where Trump is saying, you need to let my buddy Putin back in your club. That's not Trump at his strongest. That is Trump at his weakness. And strategically, it just doesn't make sense, because we know Trump is really just about projecting this kind of strength.
This is kind of strong, though, for Merkley to say which country is the American president working for.
Because America's interests are in having strong, free economies aligned with us. That's what the G7 is about. It's not just the biggest economies, it's the biggest economies that are democratic. And Mr. Trump, our president, has undermined that. You know, we do, I looked it up, according to the Trump administration, we do $673.9 billion of business every year with the Canadians, and we have a trade surplus. We only do $27 billion worth of business with the Russians, and we have a big deficit, $6 billion. So they're a bad customer, Russia. Canada's a great customer. Why are we signing with? In fact, just a second, David, because I slightly disagree with Essie in that it's not just rhetorically that this president helps Putin. He's splitting the Atlantic alliance. He's undermining the alliance of free nations. There's nothing could make Putin happier than dividing the West, dividing the free world, and then sucking up to Putin and doing his bidding. It is a fair question. This summit was a huge win for Vladimir Putin. He didn't even have to show up.
Let's talk about this summit, because, Karine, what was your response to Larry Kudlow here this morning saying that the reason the U.S. walked away from the communique was because of impudent Justin Trudeau saying rude things in his press conference about the United States and the threatened tariffs on the eve of President Trump trying to negotiate this deal with Kim Jong-un.
I think it's just ridiculous. I mean, the president is the king of pop shots. Kudlow also mentioned about the pop shots that Trudeau took. I mean, it just shows how thin-skinned and small Donald Trump is, because he's playing into our adversaries. He cares more about our adversaries than he does with our allies. And at the end of the day, what he did at G7 is going to hurt American consumers, and it's going to hurt American workers, American farmers, and that's the end here. And Donald Trump decided to walk away. He did. And he started this fight with Canada. And the thing that's really crazy, too, is that what he used as a provision to put tariffs on Canada was a national security provision. We're not going into war with Canada. Why would you even go take that direction? And why doesn't Congress, Republican-led Congress, step in? They actually have the right to do this.
There's so much
There's a lot to say, but I do want to say that they did say that. The U.S. government, the Trump administration, said that they were doing these tariffs against Canada for national security reasons. But then on Twitter, President Trump suggested that the reason the tariffs were coming were because of the high Canadian dairy tariffs, which is not the same thing.
So both things can be true. Listen, both things can be true. There's one aluminum plant in the United States that could provide aluminum for defense purposes. One. We receive. The other plant is in Canada, right? So it is a national security.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
The Aluminum Association said the tariffs, the Trump tariffs, they don't approve of. They oppose.
Okay.
The U.S. Steel Company, the U.S. workers. Yeah, I have facts. That's what I have.
Well, I have facts too. There's one plant that makes aircraft-grade aluminum. Okay.
You think if we go to war, Canada's going to cut off aluminum?
It's not going to war with Canada. It's trying to encourage more domestic production of U.S. aircraft-grade aluminum. The second part is what Larry talked about, where the tariffs, the unreasonable tariffs that Canada has on dairy and other products. That may not matter to you urbane people, but people in Pennsylvania, listen, people in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, dairy farmers across America care greatly about it. I know that's the part the Democrats don't get, but those people are important. Finally, small businesses, right?
Yeah.
There's a huge tariff. People don't even know this unless you're a small business, mom and pop doing business on the internet. If you want to ship, duty free into Canada from the U.S., there's an $800 tariff.
Let's put up these photographs. First on the left from German Chancellor Angela Merkel's press secretary, then on the right from White House social media director Dan Scavino, showing basically Trump versus the G7, the other 6 countries in the G7. Depending on your point of view, he's standing up for what's right for America, or he's being recalcitrant. What do you make of Kudlow's argument that this was all Justin Trudeau's fault?
Well, it's remarkable to see that anyone from the Trump administration whining about the way Trump was mistreated.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, because as you know, this president takes unnecessary and really indefensible shots at people all the time. And if his whole persona is the strong guy, you take it. You take the shots. And if the point was that he didn't want to look weak heading into the Singapore summit, I get that. I think you did. I think taking your toys and going home and then complaining and whining about it is not going into a summit with an international dictator with the strongest foot forward. I think you look pretty weak leaving the summit, and that's why they're all a little hurt about it.
So, Paul, according to a new poll out this week, 72% of the American people supports the Trump-Kim summit.
Oh, because everybody wants to talk, that's fine.
Apparently not the G7. Apparently not the folks
Well, see, that's what's interesting. The pictures coming out of Singapore will likely be our president smiling and shaking hands with this murderous thug. And we'll all say, oh, isn't that great? And most Americans will say, isn't that great? Because it's better to talk than to go to war. So why is it then Trump wins when he's got a picture of himself being petulant, surrounded by the leaders of the free world, democracies, who are also very good customers? That's good for Trump, but it'll also be good for Trump when he shakes hands with a murderous dictator who just a few months ago killed Otto Warmbier, an American college kid. Just a second. No, I don't want him forgotten here. Kim Jong-un has the blood on his hands of an American college kid who did nothing wrong. Otto Warmbier, the University of Virginia, and he is lost to us forever because, and hundreds of thousands of North Koreans, not to speak of, in his gulags. So I think that this president is so in search of a photo op there that the photo out of Canada is just as damaging or worse.
Listen, Paul, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, one of the best diplomats America has ever had, right? Architect of successes in Iraq and Afghanistan, wanted to negotiate with Hezbollah, right? Said, we're better off doing it than not doing it. Would you argue that would have been a bad idea? I think talking to your enemies is as far as important as talking to your friends. That picture that you just showed, you put up there, the Americans, the 62 million Americans that voted for the president, the 72% of those folks that think the president's doing a good job, they think that's what he's doing. That photo again.
But no,
standing
he
up for
walked
America.
out on his
Listen,
friends. You can't
the
have it both
president-
ways, David. I think it's good to have the summit, but it's a big win for Kim as soon as our president walks in that door. That's what the Koreans, North Koreans wanted for 60 years.
We're overlooking something the president said here.
30 seconds, go ahead.
The president said, let's talk about having no tariffs. Let's talk about having free trade.
Yeah.
You want to have free and fair trade? Let's talk about doing away with the tariffs.
Let's talk
said that.
about
Why are we
punishing
talking
Russia
But
for
David,
invading America
we
instead of
did.
rewarding
We
them.
did.
David,
last
the,
word.
David,
Last
the
word.
problem is he embraces our adversaries much better, closer. He's friendly with them than our allies.
Okay.
That's the problem.
We've got to leave it there. Sorry about that. Pardon the interruption, but have you experienced